The first time I watched Coonskin was after I had seen it on a list Quentin Tarantino had made of must-see movies. It was grotesque and brutal. Never having seen Fritz or Heavy Traffic, my only experience with Bakshi's work was American Pop. My thought at the time of viewing Coonskin was, holy shit, this movie is racist as fuck. But since then, I have seen more of Bakshi's work, and I've found that storyline is not his strength. It comes across as sporadic and fragmented, but it seems that what is more important to Bakshi is making a statement, and that he did with Coonskin. But why this statement? First, a brief history. America began in 1776 when the 13 colonies declared independence from Britain and created a new nation built on freedom and democracy. The Founding Fathers wrote in the Constitution, which gave us rights like free speech and the ability to elect our leaders. Of course, not everyone shared in that freedom right away. Slavery existed, especially in the South, where it was tied to farming and economy. Many people knew it was wrong, and the issue eventually led to the Civil War in the 1860s. The North, led by President Abraham Lincoln, fought to preserve the Union and end slavery. After a long, difficult war, slavery was abolished. The years that followed weren't easy. African Americans and immigrants often faced unfair treatment, but the country continued to grow and improve. In the 20th century, the Civil Rights Movement made sure that all Americans, regardless of race, could fully participate in democracy. Today, America is seen as a nation of opportunity, where people from all backgrounds come together to pursue the American dream. While the past had challenges, the story of the United States is one of progress, freedom, and unity. But really, from day one, the system was rigged. The Constitution itself baked in inequality, counting black people as 3/5 of a human being to boost white political power, while denying them any rights. After the Civil War, the South traded in chains for black codes, laws that criminalized freedom itself. Couldn't prove you had a job?
Right to jail.
And those prisons had rent-a-slave models that worked with plantations and factories under convict leasing. Like slavery, with extra steps. Then came Jim Crow, a century-long campaign of separate but equal that made sure equal never lived up to the definition. They were legally citizens, but they were on the bottom rung. The tricks just got more sophisticated and complicated over time. Sharecropping locked families into an endless cycle of debt. Poll taxes and literacy tests gutted the right to vote. Redlining carved black neighborhoods out of the American dream, walling off loans, housing, and generational wealth. These weren't accidents. These were policies, written in law, designed to keep people in their place. And when those walls finally started to crack in the 1960s, new ones went up. The war on drugs turned entire neighborhoods into police zones, feeding a prison industry that ballooned on black bodies. Schools resegregated through district lines, jobs vanished with deindustrialization, and tough on crime became the new Jim Crow. History didn't move forward. It doubled back. Every era promised freedom, but always with fine print. This was just a very basic summary of some of the wrongs brought upon black folks in this country. Very basic. If you would like a more detailed, unwhitewashed version of this history, you should check out Knowing Better's video, The Part of History You've Always Skipped, Neo-Slavery. It was very thorough and very well done. Coonskin is Ralph Bakshi's most controversial film. It's a hybrid of live action and animation that uses the satire of Disney's Song of the South to confront race, crime, and survival in America. The story of Brother Rabbit, Brother Bear, and Preacher Fox is a fable about leaving the South, hustling in Harlem, and fighting corrupt systems. But beneath the plot is a film about images, about how blackness has been pictured, packaged, and sold back to audiences for more than a century. Bakshi was already infamous by the time he had made Coonskin. With Fritz the Cat, the first X-rated cartoon, he proved animation could be adult, dirty, and political. Heavy Traffic dug into urban grit and semi-autobiographical street life. His style was raw, rotoscoped, collage, and jagged caricature. He came out of the animation industry but rejected its family-friendly polish. Where Disney drew dreams, Bakshi drew nightmares. Coonskin was his commentary on America's perception of blackness, using the very medium that had helped stereotype it. The minstrel show set the mold: white men in blackface, painted lips, lazy dialect, and dancing for laughs. It was the first American mass entertainment, and its caricatures spread everywhere. When animation rose in the 20th century, the masks didn't disappear. They were just redrawn. Disney dressed Mickey in blackface for melodrama. The crows in Dumbo jived in minstrel slang. Song of the South wrapped up plantation nostalgia in cartoon charm, with Brer Rabbit's Tar Baby sequence as its centerpiece. Warner Brothers shorts like Coal Black and the Seven Dwarves, Sunday Go to Meetin' Time, and Queen Pastures recycled minstrel gags wholesale. MGM's Tom and Jerry leaned on Mammy Two Shoes, a faceless maid speaking in dialect. These weren't underground cartoons, they were Saturday matinee staples. By the 1970s, Hollywood had discovered a new way to sell spectacle: blaxploitation. Shaft, Superfly, Foxy Brown, Black Caesar. On one hand, they gave audiences black heroes, swagger and center stage. On the other, they leaned hard on pimps, hustlers, and hustles, stereotypes recast in flashy leather and funk soundtracks, representation with strings. This is the stage Coonskin steps onto. Bakshi's film doesn't invent caricature, it responds to it. From minstrelsy to Disney to blaxploitation, America has always staged blackness for entertainment. So when Coonskin opens with a joke that needles white fragility, then barrels into blaxploitation-style prison break storyline and animal masks, it's not random shock. It's a reply. If Disney sugar-coated the masks so America could swallow it, Bakshi pulverizes a couple more pounds of lemons, adds them, and says, "Drink up." After the initial Golden Gate Bridge joke, the first voice we hear in Coonskin is Scatman Crothers, growling a theme song with a title designed to sting. Credited to Bakshi and Crothers, it's abrasive by design, and the message is clear. Where Disney opens with fairy dust and trumpets, Bakshi opens with a really, really catchy fuck you of a song. From there, the film slips into live action. A preacher is giving an over-the-top sermon in a church, empty but for two children. He ends the sermon with an "I see you, Lord, and you better well fucking see me," and then goes to meet his friend Samson so they could take the long trip to the prison their friend Randy is escaping from. On the way, they hit a police roadblock, make the officer go night-night, and the scene switches to just outside the prison yard, where an older inmate named Pappy leans in and begins to tell Randy a story. That story is what becomes the movie's animated core, a fable about three friends, Brother Rabbit, Brother Bear, and Preacher Fox. Like Randy, they're trying to escape a trap. They leave from the south and set their sights on Harlem, sharp, funny, desperate, and always one step ahead of the law, and a few other evils. In Coonskin, escape looks like a jailbreak. Rabbit, Bear, and Preacher Fox leap into their car and never look back. In real life, escape was slower, heavier, and stretched across decades. It's called the Great Migration. Between 1910 and 1970, over 6 million black Southerners left the Jim Crow South. They were fleeing lynch mobs, debt peonage, and sheriffs who worked for plantation owners. They weren't chasing a dream, they were running from a trap. Sharecropping kept families in permanent debt. Contracts were written to never zero out. Any dispute with a landlord could end in a beating or worse. The law was not protection, it was the whip's extension. But the North promised factory jobs, union wages, and anonymity. Black newspapers printed job listings and train schedules. Holman Porter smuggled them below the Mason-Dixon. Each ad was a flare in the dark. Come north. There's work. There's dignity. Ida Mae Brandon Gladney left Mississippi in 1937 with her husband George. They had had enough of cotton fields, of crooked contracts, and of landlords who could ruin you on a whim. They sold what little they had and boarded the Illinois Central for Chicago. Chicago wasn't gentle. They crammed into a relative's flat, took whatever work paid in cash, and breathed factory air thick with soot. But no white sheriff decided if she lived to see the next day. It wasn't easy living, but at least there their life was their own. Dr. Robert Joseph Pershing Foster was a surgeon from Louisiana. On paper, he was a doctor. In practice, Southern hospitals denied him full privileges. In 1953, he loaded up his Buick and drove west to Los Angeles. There he slowly broke through. He joined a black professional class that existed because thousands like him had bet on reinvention. His gamble was different than Ida Mae's, but it was the same wager. The South had no future for them. The film compresses all of this into a single explosive getaway. Real families planned for months, even years, mailing trunks ahead, traveling at night, and sneaking onto trains knowing local posses would call the flight theft. A bus wasn't a bus. It was just a liminal space where the South still had its claws. But the horizon was finally shifting. When Rabbit, Bear, and Fox arrive in Harlem, Coonskin shows them scheming, wheeling, and double-crossing. Played for laughs, but the satire is rooted in something real. Harlem did really run on street economies. Not because people loved crime, but because the official economy slammed its doors. Banks redlined black neighborhoods. Landlords gouged rents. Union jobs often kept black workers out. In that vacuum, informal systems stepped in. Stephanie St. Clair, Harlem's numbers queen, ran one of Harlem's biggest numbers banks. The numbers racket was a daily lottery where the neighbors bet nickels and dimes on 3-digit combinations. To outsiders, it was vice. Inside Harlem, it was banking. Winnings paid rent, bought groceries, even covered funerals. And St. Clair used the profits to publish ads in black newspapers, teaching people about their legal rights and calling out corrupt police. For many, she was both banker and defender. But Harlem's wealth attracted predators. In the 1930s, mobster Dutch Schultz tried to muscle in on the numbers business, demanding tribute from St. Clair and other operators. The fight that followed left bodies in the street. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson emerged as a strategist and enforcer, both feared and respected, who negotiated between Harlem's numbers bosses and the Mafia families downtown. What Coonskin plays as cartoon swindling was dead serious in real life. Who controlled black money when the bank said no? For Rabbit, Bear, and Fox, hustling is the punchline. For Harlem, it was survival logic. The numbers game was risky, sometimes violent, but it was also one of the few systems where Harlem could bet on itself. But every dollar that changed hand was another reason for cops to come knocking. And in Coonskin, the next predator shows up, just like in history. Crooked police. In Coonskin, Officer Manigan is seen almost like a side quest, a satire of a crooked cop coming to collect a bribe from Rabbit. But in Harlem's real history, these caricatures were rooted in systems of corruption and brutality. The police weren't outsiders. They were a part of the cartel. In Harlem, Rabbit, Bear, and Fox run into Officer Manigan, a bloated, crooked cop who bleeds the community dry. He takes bribes from the mob, terrorizes hustlers, and treats Harlem like his personal racket. He's Bakshi's stand-in for the NYPD corruption of the era. Violent, racist, and untouchable. But in Coonskin, even predators get preyed on. Rabbit eventually turns Manigan's brutality against him, setting him up and orchestrating his bloody downfall. They no shit drug him to the point of delirium, paint his face black, put him in a dress, give him a gun, and send him to the streets where his dead goons are laying. Manigan ends up getting gunned down by the same organization he works for, and in a hail of bullets he collapses in the street. It's a satirical twist of justice. The cop who treated Harlem like open season dies like any other gangster, consumed by the same violence he dishes out. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, the Knapp Commission was triggered by whistleblower Frank Serpico, who exposed systematic corruption in the NYPD. Officers were regularly demanding payoffs from street vendors, numbers operators, and informal economies, especially in majority black neighborhoods. What in Coonskin feels exaggerated was, in many precincts, standard operating procedure. The killing of 15-year-old James Powell by an NYPD officer in 1964 triggered a week-long uprising in Harlem. Locals had already been complaining about heavy-handed patrols, routine stops, shakedowns, and bribe demands. The uprising was more than grief. It was revolt against the precinct that saw the community not as people, but as a revenue source. When Rabbit, Bear, and Fox are rousted by cops in Coonskin, it's played for satire. But satirical or not, what's being exaggerated is real. The predatory dynamics, the fear, the forced payments, It wasn't a punchline for Harlem, it was policy. And for many, Coonskin's version echoes what they were afraid to say out loud. Despite the abuse, the community pushed back. Local groups organized watch patrols. Civil rights lawyers sued the city, and press coverage began framing Harlem not as the problem, but as survivors and resistors. The state's enforcers often failed at basic enforcement and excelled as extractors. Once Rabbit, Bear, and Fox climb higher, they collide with a different predator: organized crime. The movie portrays the head of the Mafia as a grotesque caricature of Don Corleone, whose sons are effeminate homosexual cross-dressers, as a way of undermining the hyper-masculine ideal of gangsters that Bakshi didn't care for. Regardless of how he portrayed the Mafia in the movie, for Harlem, they were predators and deadly serious, for real. In the 1930s, mob boss Dutch Schultz tried to muscle into Harlem's numbers economy, shaking down the community's bankers for tribute. It sparked violence and turf wars that spilled into the headlines. When Schultz was assassinated in 1935, it wasn't just a mob story. It was Harlem proving that its money couldn't be stolen without a fight. But by the 1960s, the terrain had shifted. Harlem's underground wealth no longer flowed mainly from number slips. It came from heroin. Global supply lines opened through Italy, Turkey, and eventually Vietnam. What had once been community-based lottery became an economy of addiction. Frank Lucas bragged about smuggling heroin in coffins flown back from the Vietnam War. Nicky Barnes turned himself into a celebrity kingpin, grinning from the front page of the New York Times. They styled themselves as businessmen, but the price Harlem paid was staggering. Overdoses, broken families, and police crackdowns that filled cells faster than the streets. The film exaggerates the mob, but behind the parody is a truth Harlem lived. Outside forces came for its money, while Harlem itself was left to shoulder the wreckage. In Coonskin, the church isn't holy ground, it's another hustle. Bakshi splits the satire into two: Preacher Fox, the small-time operator, and Simple Savior, the larger-than-life revolutionary preacher. Both wear the mask of faith, both sell salvation. Preacher Fox's congregation is no congregation at all. Behind the stained glass and hymns, he's running a brothel. The pulpit is a disguise, the sermon a sales pitch. Reinforcing this pimp stereotype, Fox is not saving souls, he's pimping them. And then you have Simple Savior, a parody of a prosperity preacher and a militant leader rolled into one. He struts across the stage, whipping his followers into a frenzy, promising that every dollar in the collection plate is money to
Kill Whitey! No!
It's outrageous and intentional. Bakshi is mocking both the paranoia of white America in the 1970s and the way real anger could be twisted into performance. Simple Savior isn't leading a revolution, he's selling one. In Coonskin, there is no safe system. Not the cops, not the mob, not even the church. Whether it's sex under the altar or sermons for sale, faith is just another hustle in the world where survival means wearing a mask. Let's talk about Miss America. There are 4 scenes in this movie with Miss America. The first scene is a well-dressed black man talking about how well the relationship is going with her, and asking if he can take her home to squeeze on them big titties. To this, she responds by throwing him to the ground, smashing him with a fire hydrant, and then repeatedly punching him in the head with spiked brass knuckles. First, you have the caricature of how America sees black men, then the hope of black folks after moving from the South only to face more systemic oppression. In the second scene, a militant black man decides to fight back, in which she says, "I give up, you can take me," only to be another trap where she apparently has a gun in her coochie that shoots him in the face. I would say this is a representation of how the FBI worked their asses off to shut down the Black Panther Party, but the internet says it's just a general interpretation of America shitting on the black community. In the third scene, a black poet speaks about going his own way and finding his own path. And to this, she screams rape, and he is promptly hung at the gallows. Again, the black community fights to find their own way and make things work, while the country once again fights against their efforts. And then you have the fourth scene. Miss America is drunk at Rabbit's club and urging him to find a fighter to fight his friend Bear, who has become a professional fighter for the Mafia. In fact, this is just a setup in which the Mafia plans to assassinate Rabbit. I thought this was a very clever placement of the Tar Baby scene, despite the fact that in Song of the South, Rare Rabbit is the one that gets trapped. When Coonskin premiered in 1975, it didn't land quietly. The Congress of Racial Equality picketed its release in New York, calling it racist. Protesters stormed screenings, some shutting theaters down. Bakshi defended the film, insisting it was an attack on racism and not a celebration of it. Part of the problem was timing. The 70s were already tense. Blaxploitation films were being criticized for recycling stereotypes, while black artists were demanding more authentic representation. And then into that climate walks a white animator with a film called Coonskin. Even supporters admitted the title itself was gasoline. Yet some black critics saw the intent. Novelist Ishmael Reed praised Coonskin as satire sharper than most blaxploitation films. Over time, the film picked up a cult following. Later, critics would call it ahead of its time. Messy, angry, but brutally honest about America's racial imagination. Coonskin wasn't polite. It wasn't careful. It drags every mask America has put on blackness. Minstrels, cartoons, cops, hustlers, preachers, and mobsters, and throws them back at the audience. Some saw racism, some saw truth. Most saw something they couldn't unsee. Rabbit, Bear, and Fox survive, but only by outsmarting a world designed to exploit them. In the end, they escape successfully and live to fight another day. Harlem isn't salvation, it's another stage. Bakshi's point wasn't subtle. America has always staged blackness. From burnt cork and cartoons to blaxploitation glam, it's been performance for profit. Coonskin is the rare film that refuses to soften the mask. It exaggerated the mask and said, "This is how you see blackness." Go ahead, take a look. Nearly 50 years later, it still stings because it's familiar. The stereotypes shift, the stage changes, but the performance, the commodification of blackness remains. Coonskin wasn't just about Rabbit, Bear, and Fox. It's about America, and the question it leaves hanging is simple. When the mask comes off, what do we really see? Well, this one took too long for what it was, and it's dawning on me right now that, go figure, a white guy does a video about a white guy who made a movie criticizing America for its use on blackness. Well, I hope you enjoyed or at least took something away from this video. Until next time, take it easy.